listening to GWP Live. I'm your host, Isaac Hedges, joined once again by co-host Jacob Fulmer. We are once again delivering live weather updates as we get closer and closer to this winter storm. We have more details on that. So, Jake, what are things looking like at this point with this winter storm headed our way?
Yeah, so again, we've had quite a few changes, I would say, that have occurred in the last 24 hours, which again is to be expected as we get closer and closer to the actual event. Of course, snow totals have moved a little bit, the storm track, the timing, all of that has kind of been ironed out on the details. And so that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. And then additionally, actually, before we get into it here, we actually have some other news and some sports to get to, as normally on tonight, we would be doing our weekly recap. Of course, tonight with the winter storm coming in tomorrow, we are doing this instead. So I guess we'll go ahead and we'll actually start off with just a couple of quick news stories today. Of course, one of them being with the FBI catching pretty bad criminal, is what I've heard.
Yes, is what I hear, Jake. A pretty extensive criminal record at that, certainly, and it's what you'd expect considering the FBI was going after him. Now, what exactly do we know about this guy's rap sheet, about his criminal record?
Yeah, so we know that Wedding, which of course is his last name, we know that he was responsible for many different crimes when it came to smuggling different drugs in and out of countries. He actually worked for Iran as well, and I believe a few other countries maybe as well, but to smuggle in drugs. And that was back in 2010. He did serve a little bit of time in prison before being released in 2011. We also know that there's charges that have been pressed for him killing a few people who were witnesses to the crime, who possibly could have turned him in. So we know that that was something that happened the last couple of years. We know that he was on the top 10 most wanted on the FBI list. And so that's obviously pretty big as well. And we know that he actually turned himself in, we should say, back in Mexico City is where that took place today. And oh, and I guess, we're going to have an episode about the Winter Olympics since they are coming up here in just a few weeks. We're going to have an episode on opening night of the Winter Olympics right here on the Great World Productions, on the Great World Podcast, is where we'll have that episode later in the month of February, of course. But tying into that, he was actually in the Winter Olympics back in 2002. And so we know that he competed there. And I guess he didn't like that because, well, he moved to Vancouver. And then that's when all of this started. It was after he participated in the Winter Olympics back 24 years ago.
Oh, wow, really? Apparently things didn't go as well, didn't go quite as he had planned at the Olympics. So, quite the turn in events. Not the sort of story you ordinarily hear from a past Olympian. Certainly, again, there, of course, a hard boiled criminal, a number of different things here, a number of different offenses on his record, a lot of drug smuggling, working with different countries to do that, getting those into the United States, certainly, and even killed some potential witnesses. And perhaps what's even a bit more unusual about this story, Jake, is that this fella that is, who was on the run for quite some time. It lasted some time, and naturally, the FBI, again, federal level law enforcement was going after him. Again, last we knew, he got out. He escaped at some point in 2011, you said, and now they've actually caught him in Mexico City. But it was actually because he turned himself in. So a hard-boiled criminal gives up the chase. Not a story that you hear every day. Jake?
Yeah, certainly not. And again, because he was on that top 10 most wanted list from the FBI, we have to know that this is definitely something that the FBI has wanted to get done for quite some time. I mean, top 10, I mean, out of all of the people in the world that they're most concerned about, and he's in the top 10. And again, this has been going on for decades. And again, it appears that he did serve a little bit of time in prison, but obviously that did not really necessarily go very far in helping him to kind of, I guess you could say, turn back from the path, I guess you could say. So
Right.
didn't really work.
Right. It would certainly seem that any efforts in his past prison sentence weren't quite sufficient in terms of rehabilitation. But now he's turned himself in, given up the chase. So presumably, with him, it's off to federal prison at the very least. So presumably, Jake, I don't know what we know at this point as to what exactly the repercussions are, though I imagine they'd be quite serious. I'd imagine at the least, it's a pretty extensive, maybe life sentence in federal prison, if not more than that. Do we know exactly what's happening with this fella?
Yeah, now that's something that I didn't really look into as much as his history, I guess we could say. But yeah, I would certainly imagine, I mean, probably a lifetime of prison, I would say. In fact, I would almost say he's lucky if he gets a lifetime in prison, based on
I
what
would
I would
say
say the
so.
charges are.
I would say
So,
so. A
yes,
number
so I
of
think so.
severe charges there, of course. In terms of any recent developments on that story, seems fairly major, so we will continue to follow that and deliver any new information on that as this coming week on GWP News Weekly, so you'll have to stay tuned for that. Jake?
Yes, and so that kind of is one of our top news stories that we would have covered in our weekly recap that we do on Fridays or that we started last week. So, as far as sports go, of course, one of the major events going on, well, it's actually kind of a double event that's going to be happening, but we got the AFC and the NFC championship games. Both of those are occurring. The AFC one at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, and then the uh, NFC one at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time as well. So again, you can catch those games. Of course, the winners of those games will face off in California 2 weeks from this coming Sunday in the 60th Super Bowl, where somebody will be crowned the world champions in the NFL, and it's going to be a team that hasn't won in most likely quite a while, I would say, based on our opponents that we're looking at.
Yes, chances are, as in recent times we've covered, certainly on GWP News, it seems that this past season we've seen a considerable shakeups in the standings in the NFL. Now, Jake, for those who might not follow it all that closely, for those who may just tune in to the championships, presumably we've got an idea at the very least. Do we know that those championships, again, the AFC and NFC respectively, what teams will be competing?
Yes, we do know the teams that are going to be competing, and so of course we've got the AFC game that's going to be first. That's going to be on CBS and Paramount Plus is where you can find that. Again, that's at 3:30, and that's going to be in Denver. It's going to be Denver versus the Patriots, the number one and the number two seed. Of course, the Patriots are the most recent team out of that. I guess you could say the four teams that are left. The Patriots are the most recent team to have won a Super Bowl. Of course, they won one with Tom Brady, I believe, about 7 Super Bowls ago. So that's the most recent win from the Patriots. The Patriots have appeared more times than any other team, and I just now realized that I'm spoiling some trivia questions in one of our upcoming episodes. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there. But that's the first game on that. And then the second game, of course, is going to be the Seattle Seahawks, and they are going to be facing off against the Los Angeles Rams. And so that is our matchup.
Absolutely. So Seattle Seahawks at the Los Angeles Rams on the NFC side, and on the AFC side, we've got the Denver Broncos at the New England Patriots. So you'll have to stay tuned for that. Naturally, if you miss out on those games, we'll be covering those, of course, as we've covered throughout the NFL season's major championship games there. So if you miss out on that, not to fret, just tune in to GWP News Weekly, and we'll get you taken care of for all that information that you may have missed out on about any information that you ought to know, news, weather, and sports headed into the week. You'll have to stay tuned for that coming your way on a Monday. But again, just a couple of those teams from those championships games will be very soon competing in the Super
Yeah.
Bowl. So again, it'll be interesting to see who wins in each of those championship games and who ends up making it to the Super Bowl. Jake?
Yeah, and there was a couple of other things I forgot to mention. Of course, the Rams are the only team that is a wild card team that's left in the playoffs. They're the number 5 seed, which means they're going to be traveling to Seattle. So that's where the NFC game is going to be at. A couple of other things that I didn't necessarily cover. Of course, Seattle is where the game is at. Seattle, Washington, with Seattle being the home team because they're the higher seed, as I mentioned. But also, I mentioned that you can find the AFC Championship game on CBS and Paramount Plus. Well, you can also find the NFC Championship game on Fox and Fox One. So that's the location of that game, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, which means 5:30 local time. That would mean 2 o'clock for the AFC game in our local time, and that, of course, is Central Standard Time.
Absolutely. So y'all will want to stay tuned for that and see how it shakes out. And again, if you don't catch that, just tune in to GWP News for all the latest information on that. So again, in either case, not to worry. And of course, as in the past, throughout the week, naturally, we've been taking calls, certainly, or we've offered that opportunity. Not to say that we have had a lot of that. Again, we are coming to the end of week. The reason, naturally, that we've been doing GWP live throughout this week is due to this winter storm. And again, it'll be here before we know it. And then before long, it'll likely be gone before we know it. So there might not be a lot of opportunity in the foreseeable future to call in on GWP Live. So if you've got any questions, again, a number of different things, because we are also doing a bit of a GWP weekly recap here. We talked about the story with the FBI, talked about some different sporting events, things going on within the NFL, and we're just now getting to some more information on that winter storm. So if you've got questions about anything of the sort, anything like that related to it, something entirely different that's going on that you'd like to pick our brains on, you'd like to get our insight, well, certainly call in. You want to do that now because, again, it's hard saying when you'll have that opportunity next. If you'd like to do that, the number is 417-448-0819. Call that number and let us know what your question is. Again, if you'd like to call in, that number is 417-448-0819. So, Jake, in terms of this storm that's headed our way, again, we're already getting quite close to it. Just today, temperatures have taken quite a considerable dip. I believe at the moment here in our local area, it's roughly 6 degrees here in Nevada, so single digit temperatures. Again, some of the coldest we've seen up to this point throughout the year. I know it's similar, perhaps even a bit colder where you are in Columbia. So it's clear that we're getting much closer to this winter storm. Seems we're going to see a fair bit of snow at that point. It might be more difficult to get out and about. So as we mentioned, as we recommended beforehand, again, time is running out. We don't have snow on the ground yet. So if there are any of those last minute preparations that you've yet to make, you might want to run out, make a quick grocery run, get things. You need to buy a new space heater just in case for the cold temperatures. You may want to run out and do that now while you're still able to get out, and a number of different precautionary things we talked about. Of course, dripping those faucets, opening up those cabinets under the sink to help ensure that those pipes don't freeze, and even any outdoor pets might be out there. It might be a good idea to consider bringing them in for the night because these are, again, dangerously cold temperatures that we're seeing here now. Jake, in terms of some of the precipitation, what we're expecting to see coming our way with this winter storm, how's it looking?
Yeah, so it looks like we'll definitely still have all snow throughout this event. There is the possibility south of Interstate 44 that a little bit of sleet could mix in, but ice is not expected. And so that is some good news. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at some of the different alerts issued by the different National Weather Service offices. We'll give you some information on traveling, power outages, and then we'll look at that snowfall forecast. I'm not going to update these numbers anymore. I'm not going to update them tomorrow or anything like that. This will be the final forecast for that. And then we'll briefly look at temperatures and how long all of the snow is going to stick around once it goes away, or I mean, once it stops falling. So, because it won't go away for a while. So, anyways, we'll start off here with the National Weather Service providing graphics of our national weather alerts here. And you'll notice that we have, I was looking earlier today, and this still holds true. We have weather alerts in every single state in the country except for the state of Nevada. As you'll see, we have a few in Hawaii, a few in Alaska, a few states out west with some air quality stuff, and then some non-winter alerts. But and I guess here, I guess you could say Washington, but there is a coastal alert right there. So really, the state of Nevada is the only state that doesn't have any type of weather alert currently in effect. And you'll notice that every single state from Arizona and Utah eastward is under some sort of winter alert, including even in the state of Florida. There's a cold weather. This is actually an extreme cold watch, is what this is. I believe that's what that is. Yes, extreme cold watch is what that is. As you can see, that's from the National Weather Service office in Mobile. So extreme cold watches here across, I guess you could say this kind of, I guess you would call that a kind of a odd greenish, grayish type color,
Ah,
whatever you want
yes.
to call that. And then we've got extreme cold warnings further to the north. That's where the wind chills are 30 degrees below zero. I know that Duluth earlier this morning was at negative 24 degrees, and that wasn't the wind chill, that was the actual temperature. Here in Missouri, we've been anywhere between 10 to 15 degrees below zero. And of course, we've got winter storm warnings for the entire viewing area. And when I say viewing area, I pretty much mean from Interstate 44 all the way to Interstate 70. That's kind of the area that we cover for our weather forecast. And that, of course, includes Joplin, Nevada, and Columbia, some of the big cities, or, just some of the cities that we cover in general where our viewers are mainly at. But we'll also look at some other things. We got those winter storm warnings across New Mexico and Texas. We could be looking at a couple of feet of snow out of this. That's, of course, going to be a really big possibility as well. There we go. Disappeared there for a second. Then we got those ice storm warnings where the heavier ice is going to be across eastern Texas over to Tennessee, Georgia, the Carolinas, into Tennessee. We got some of those ice storm warnings. Some of these areas could get 1 to 2 inches of ice. So that's, of course, going to be a really big concern with that power. Power outages are not expected here across the state of Missouri. And so that is the good news. Now we'll go ahead and we'll show you. So here's the National Weather Service office here in Kansas City. That's where we're getting these graphics from. Of course, you can see Columbia is kind of like the northern edge of those winter storm warnings. The description reads 6 to 12 inches of snow across this portion of Missouri. And so that certainly is a substantial amount. That's at least what the National Weather Service expects us to get here. Further to the south, snowfall totals 7 to 14 inches is what I've seen forecasted from the National Weather Service in Springfield. Of course, winter storm warnings go for the entire southwest and central Missouri area. So here's a look at that radar right now. Now, I don't want anybody to get confused here. This is not rain. Some of this is rain, but not all of this is rain. This is just showing precipitation. So this is rain, ice, sleet, and snow. Across Kansas and Missouri, all of this is snow. So all of this is snow, maybe a little bit of sleet mixed in over here. And so you'll notice that we're fighting off some of that drier air right now. So a lot of this is not actually reaching the ground. It's just at the surface level, or at the upper levels, I should say. Snow is starting to move into central and eastern Kansas. I was looking in Norman, Oklahoma. They're at about 2 inches of accumulation right now. So things are starting to come down there in Oklahoma, Kansas. Kansas even had some snow earlier this morning. And then now I believe we're probably getting into some light snow from Joplin to Nevada. Would not be surprised if we had snow at this time. Probably not very heavy. So I think you could still travel if you really needed to the next couple of hours, but after about 3 a.m., that's when it's going to get really bad. That's when the roads are going to start to deteriorate. And especially by tomorrow night, Saturday night into Sunday, that's when the heaviest snow is going to move in, and that's when the worst of the conditions will be.
Absolutely. So, Jake, as you mentioned, as for here in Southwest Missouri at this point, not quite that bad, at least not yet. So again, as we just mentioned, any of those different precautionary measures that we mentioned before. Again, getting out for different last minute preparations. If you need to do that, you're probably still safe to do it now, but you want to get it done now and do it sooner rather than later. Now, in terms of other things, one other thing that I was going to mention, Jake, of course, you noted that certainly in terms of here in southwest Missouri, not a lot of risk of power outages. That is a risk that we start looking at. The colder and colder things get, the more winter precipitation that we see, and across kind of certainly as you go south, interestingly, as we talked about, you see more of these cold temperatures, more of this winter precipitation, and there's been talk of that certainly on a national scale, and we've already talked about in past episodes on the Great World Podcast on GWP News how, again, many parts of our country have a rundown power grid. I mean, we've seen different states certainly already have to do like rolling blackouts, brownouts, just to accommodate all the things on their power grid, and it's sort of a setup that wasn't really meant to be used for all that long. We've been using it for much longer than it was intended to. One time you gave me the exact numbers on that, Jake, but again, worth noting there. So some of those areas where you're more getting some of that more severe weather, some of the worst effects of those winter storms, it is worth making those preparations. Certainly, in terms of having something like a backup generator, that'll be very nice because the power going out, certainly in these severe conditions, they make it all the worse. The only upside of that is you don't have to worry about the refrigerator because you got a bit of natural refrigeration. But other than that, there are some pretty important things that naturally it's not difficult to see how in this extreme cold, again, your furnaces are working overtime, they're running a lot more, and that takes its toll on the power grid, just one of the many things. And to make things worse, when things go out or power lines go down or something due to the storms, again, while these conditions are like this, while the storm is still raging, there's only so much that can be done, and it may be some time before those are repaired again, before the power gets back up and running. So certainly not a risk at this point in southwest Missouri, but as you go out across the United States, it is a very real risk. Of course, as we talked about before, fairly extensively with the power grid in many parts of the country. Jake?
Yes, yes. So certainly prepare for power outages, at least further to our south, but not necessarily as big of a concern here across Missouri. Of course, we looked at this here from the NOAA National Weather Service radar, which is what we're using to show you what's currently going on here. And again, that edge of the storm is starting to move in, which means that accumulations start to take place within the next few hours. Of course, you did mention the power concerns. This is from poweroutage.com. Anybody can see this. It's an interactive map. We'll go ahead and we'll kind of update this here. 28,000 customers are currently without power. On average, there's about 3 people that accommodate for each customer. So that means you could take this number times 3, and that's about how many people are without power across the country. So roughly let's say 84,000 people are currently without power. And this includes all 50 states here. Of course, you'll notice that Texas here is leading the numbers here at about 6,000 outages. If we kind of zoom in here, the good news is that it's not widespread. It looks like it's just in this one Loving County right here. There's 16% of that county is without power, but overall things are still looking pretty good. Of course, the Texas power grid has not handled certain winter storms super well in the past. Of course, 5 years ago, there was a really big storm that moved in and that wiped out the power grid for at least several days and caused pipes to burst and things of that nature. We don't necessarily anticipate that to happen, but something on a smaller scale could transpire. It's not expected to stay as cold for that long, but it certainly is possible. And something else to mention is that Texas has strengthened their power grid since that event took place back in 2021 in February. And so, as far as Missouri, we're still doing very good. No major outages. Vernon County is actually at 0 outages. Jasper County, 0 outages. Of course, that's where Nevada and Joplin is at. Columbia here is in Boone County. There's 0 outages as well. So we're still doing really good as far as power outages go. But if you want to continue to check in on that, this update's live to the minute, or at least every 5 to 10 minutes it updates. You can go to poweroutage.com and you can see this update live.
Absolutely, great resource there to check on potential power outages in your area. Again, they're poweroutage.com. But as we mentioned, though, not a huge concern for us here, really across Missouri, certainly not in southwest Missouri where we are. But if you're in different parts of the country, certainly in Texas, as we mentioned, that'd be worth taking a look at, worth considering. That is, if you have power to look at it. Again, some of the folks there might not even have the power to do that, unfortunately. So hopefully things are restored there soon. And Jake, again, that's interesting that you mentioned that. Of course, we've talked about that on past episodes, the issues with different power grids. I believe that, yes, like you said, back in 2021, what was it, the Nord power grid there in Texas having a serious issue where that went down. But again, very interesting. Now, returning to our winter storm here that's headed our way, a very short order. What else should we know, Jake?
Um, Yes, yeah, we're looking at, of course, current road conditions. This is from MoDot, something else that anybody in the public can access. All you have to do on any of your devices is go to traveler.modot.org/map slash. That's how you get to this, and it shows you road conditions. So good news is green means go. That's what it means on a traffic light. Well, it means the same thing here. It means that things are totally clear out there. There may be like one patch of black ice, of course. Obviously, that can't be ruled out, but overall, things are very clear. Now, of course, this only shows you the major highways and interstates. Like, of course, we have, it does show state highways, or at least some state highways like 43, 54. And then, of course, it always covers your major interstates like 49 and 70. And so this is a really great resource if you want to travel somewhere and you want to see how the road conditions are across the state of Missouri. So, I mean, obviously, we can't see every single road across the state of Missouri, but if you see that Interstate 49 in northern Vernon County is clear, then you can probably assume that some of the other roads across this area are also clear. Maybe not quite as clear because some of those I guess you could say those more county roads will likely not be cleared off as quickly. Of course, here's that legend here. So, of course, if you get in the light blue, mostly clear, darker blue, partly covered, purple is covered, and hopefully this doesn't happen this weekend, although it certainly could. The red means it's just flat out closed. And usually, the reason I say hopefully that doesn't happen is usually that means that a multi-car pileup has occurred. Unfortunately, is usually why roads are closed in the middle of a storm. And so hopefully that doesn't end up being the case. Of course, we did have a snow here in Columbia. We had 2.6 inches back on December 1st here in Columbia. There was a multi-vehicle crash that took place on Interstate 70 in Boone County. So, or at least near Boone County. I don't quite know exactly where that was, but I know it was near the city of Columbia. So it doesn't take a lot. I mean, that was only a couple inches of snow and it led to a pileup. So it certainly does not take a lot. And we're certainly going to have enough across the entire state of Missouri to where it could happen.
No, again, certainly a very serious risk there. We don't want to see that. Another multiple car power, or excuse me, another multiple car pile up causing that sort of wreck, causing road closing. Again, generally is the cause of that there, which will be marked there on the MoDOT road conditions map if looking for somewhere to check
Yeah.
out the road conditions. So again, things aren't as severe as they might be, as we've mentioned several times here. So somewhat unlikely, but again, the risk and the possibility of it is still there. As we mentioned, if you can help it, if you can avoid going out during the storm, just don't bother. Just don't do it. Just wait out the storm and go out a bit later if you can do it, because again, there are different things. Certainly, with the snow coming down affecting road visibility, that makes one more prone to car accidents. Certainly for yourself as the driver and other drivers coming at you. is worth considering. So if you do have to get out, you want to be very safe, very careful out there. Jake?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, certainly make sure that that if you don't have to travel, especially after midnight, that you don't necessarily get out there because that could lead to what we saw back on December 1st on Interstate 70. So again, now we'll go ahead and we'll look at some of the timing here, and then we'll look at that snowfall forecast. We won't necessarily look as in detail at this particular part of it as we have in the past few days because, well, we're now at that point in the storm system. The other thing is, again, you can always reach out using that phone line, as we mentioned. So you can go ahead and call that in as well. And I will say this. I mean, realistically, you can call that number even when we're not live on the air. In fact, I will answer it 24 hours a day just for this weekend. For this weekend only, I will answer it 24 hours a day. So
Absolutely.
I will be taking calls. And so that could be anybody across our four states area. I mean, really, if you were traveling in like Tennessee, I would even try to give you some guidance on that if you have any questions or want some additional information from what you may have yourself, or maybe you don't have really a way to get to all of these things because of whatever situation you're in. And so, um, and then so, of course, let's go ahead and so again, the outer edge of the storm is around the Kansas-Missouri border, which you can see the European model here, as we see on Tropical Tidbits, is really picking up on that quite well here, the outer edge of this storm here. And so this is the one model that I think is the most accurate, or has the most accurate representation of what I think is going to happen today. So we're going to look at that one specifically today. And so you'll notice, of course, that ice beginning to build in later tonight across the Red River Valley into Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi as we go into the morning hours on Saturday. Again, it's going to be very light snow for the first several hours of this event. We may not even have a lot of snow on the ground by tomorrow morning. But do not be fooled, because as we go into the day on Saturday, those snowfall rates, especially south of Interstate 70, are really going to be on the increase. And we're going to have our heaviest accumulation between about 4 p.m. tomorrow and about 7 a.m. on Sunday. That's when the heaviest snow is going to occur. Most of the snow will be gone by about lunchtime on Sunday. Now, of course, we've been looking at some different models to get an idea of how much snow is possible. This is the NBM 1D viewer, which of course we've looked at the last few days a little bit, currently saying here in Columbia that there is a 65% chance of more than a foot of snow, according to this one model. I think this is overdoing it, but this shows that there is the possibility for some very significant snowfall, possibly much higher than what is in the forecast in general here. And so this one, the NBM is particularly saying 7.7 inches for this particular event. It's even picking up on a little bit of snow next week. Way too early to know anything about that for now. This is the one for Joplin. The one for Joplin is predicting about a foot of snow, just right under a foot. And the one from Joplin is saying that there is a 76% chance of a foot or more. Again, I think this is on the higher side of things, but it is something that is certainly worth noting. Of course, we've kind of been showing this. Which really, again, we could be looking at a whole season's worth of snowfall there in Nevada. And here's the final snowfall forecast. This is throughout the entire storm. This is in case some areas in Missouri have already seen accumulation. I don't think that is the case, but in case you have, this is including that. This is a total of everything that we're expecting here. I'm saying 4 to 7 inches here across this teal color, including Columbia. Anywhere north of Interstate 70, the amounts are going to drop off quite a bit. And then you can see along Highway 54 up to Jefferson City, and then down through Lake of the Ozarks through Nevada. That's kind of the cutoff for this next little area here, 6 to 10 inches. That does include Nevada and Joplin. And then there's a little bit of southwestern Missouri that could even be getting up to a foot of snow. Again, I think these numbers are a little bit on the low end of what we could see, but I think we're most likely to not get as much snow as some of the other forecasts that I've seen. I think some of the forecast models are overdoing it for one particular reason. The cold front was a little bit stronger than what we anticipated, just a little bit. And because of that, it made the air a little bit drier, which means it's going to be harder to get that snow to accumulate. So that is the main reason why I think the snowfall totals are going to be a little bit lower. Again, if you do look at those other forecasts, it is a little bit higher. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's not going to be. Here in Columbia, we could certainly still get 8 or 9 inches. Nevada could still get a foot of snow. And there will be some areas within this that get more. So it says 4 to 7 across this teal area, but there will be areas in the teal that will get 9 inches. There will be some areas that get a foot in this pink area. There will be some areas that might get up to 15 inches across this 9 to 12. So this is probably on the lower end of things, but there will be isolated areas that get higher amounts, possibly as much as double of what this forecast is showing on the
Absolutely.
extreme end of things, on
Uh,
the really extreme end.
Yes, absolutely. Great to know. Certainly important to know going into this winter storm. Again, a good chance that we'll see snowfall totals just a bit on the lower end of what some of these models are predicting, but we will be receiving a fair bit nonetheless, chances are. Again, that is still included. Certainly here in southwest Missouri, more than we've seen it. Well, our first snow of the year naturally, so more than we've seen at all this year. So certainly it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see just exactly how much snow we get and what some of the impacts of that are. Jake?
Yeah, it just I really I know that this NBM one D viewer here, right? Yes, one D viewer. Just had to make sure there that I'm telling you the right stuff here. Um, I just think it's very fascinating that this particular model is saying that there is a 85% chance of greater than 8 inches, 65% chance of over a foot. I just don't necessarily know that that's going to happen. And so that's why I think it's best to assume these are the isolated amounts. These are not what most people are going to see. But I will say, if we get some of these numbers, if we get over a foot of snow in some areas, which again, it's going to happen in very few areas, very few, but there will be some that see over a foot because that's how it always works. If you have a foot of snow, that is going to be very impactful. That will disrupt travel for several days. One of those reasons, of course, being because it is just going to stay so cold the next several days. Wind chills likely not getting above zero until Monday.
Absolutely, yes. Again, some very important, vital information to know going into this snowstorm and being prepared for it. And you'll have to bear with us as we do seem to be experimenting or experiencing that is minor technical difficulties in terms of connection. Perhaps the weather might have a little bit to do with that. So, again, some minor connection breaks. We thank you as always for your patience, certainly. And if there's a bit that broke out, even on your end, perhaps you're experiencing internet connection difficulties, things aren't coming through clear on your end just due a poor internet connection, or whatever reason you just missed something that we said. Again, another great reason to call in and ask us. Again, don't worry about bothering us. Certainly, we'd be happy to answer your questions. Again, if you'd like to do that, you can always do that. In addition to calling us by putting your questions in the live chat here, we can answer them that way. Or naturally, you can call our number, the offices of Great World Productions, at 417-448-0819. Let us know what those questions are. Again, that's 417-448-0819. Jake?
Yes, and outside of our live stream, I will also be answering questions on 417-288-8391. That's where I'll be taking 24-hour questions, at least through Sunday is when I'll be doing that, all the way through Sunday. And so, um, And again, if you do have a question, you do put it in the live chat, then we will answer it live right now, or we will respond back to it if the live stream is already over by the time you send that question in. So you can always put it in the comments afterwards, after the live stream. And I say that because we are in the final 2 or 3 minutes, I would say, of this particular live stream here. And we're going to show why this snowfall is not going to be going anywhere for quite some time. Again, we're going to be staying below average all the way through Monday. This once again is from tropicaltidbits.com, so you can find this if you would like to. This is particularly the GFS model temperature anomalies. So this is comparing our temperatures to average, again, 15 to 20 degrees below average as we go into Monday, not below zero. Yes, our wind chills will be there, but this is just below average on this particular map. A bit of a warm up on Tuesday. Some of us could get above freezing, particularly in southern Missouri on Tuesday, but then another surge of colder air as we go into the middle of late part of next week, and that could even linger into next weekend. So once the snow falls, it's not really going to go anywhere for quite some time, or at least not very fast. Of course, the snow is one way that, or I mean, the sun rather, the sun can melt snow pretty quickly, but not as quickly as the temperature can. And so it all away, not when you have this much. And so that is something to note here. And then the last thing that we're going to leave you with here is this here from the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center, their temperature outlooks. So the 6 to 10 day outlook showing that we're going to be well below average, likely well below average across the central and eastern part of the country here from the 29th of this month to February 2nd. Precipitation, you'll notice, is on the below average side. So not expecting a whole lot in the way of snow after this weekend. It is possible, but the chances are very low. Then we go to the 8 to 14 day forecast. This takes you through the first week of February. So this is now a couple weeks into the forecast. Temperatures still a little bit below average and below average on precipitation. And then now, newly updated as of today, that week 3 and 4 temperature outlook that takes us into the second and third week of February is showing potentially below average temperatures across the eastern third of the country with equal chances for precipitation, meaning that additional chances for snow are going to be possible into the month of February. Not necessarily a guarantee. We can't necessarily give specific days or amounts or anything like that, but it just means that we're going to have additional things to watch, and we're going to need to watch very closely as we go through the next 4 weeks or so.
Absolutely. So again, some very important things to know going into those storms. And again, as you mentioned, Jake, just moments ago, again, a great resource here at your disposal in terms of some of those different weather predictions. If you need any more of that information, you need to know it, you can always call in, message, as we mentioned, those numbers previously. But again, time is running out. If you want us to get to those questions here in this live stream, again, not much time left at all to do that. Again, another way you can always put that here in the live chat, Jake.
Yes, and again, then you can also reach out after this live stream to 417-288-8391 with questions. That can be in the form of messages or it could be in the form of calls, whichever your preferences, or even emails. You can reach out to the GWP email, GWP international at AT&T.com there. So I believe that's all the time that we have for tonight's live stream.
Yes, I believe it is. And just a brief correction on that. That is on our email address. That is gwpinternational at att.net, not .com. That's
Yes.
gwp-international at att.net. Let us know if you've got any questions. Don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be happy to answer you, and we'll certainly do so to the best of our ability. And if we don't know, well, then will tell you that. So I do believe that is
Yes,
all for
and
now.
I have to say, we everything else that we've been looking at here, all these graphics have been everything's been like .com, and so I guess that's why I was since everything else has been .com.
Yes,
So
well, you say
bit of a
that.
slip up there. Thank you for clarifying that, so that people are not emailing emails that don't exist.
Yes, you
So,
say that, Jay Cover. I noticed that the site we're currently on here, the National Weather Service, NOAA.gov. So not exactly
well, I
a
was saying, well,
.com.
this one .com,
Yes, I see.
um,
Yes, common
well,
pattern,
that's I
certainly.
guess that one. Well, that one's Gov, I guess, but that's org.
Yes, I see what you're
Their
saying. Easy to do.
poweroutage.com. Poweroutage.com was, but yeah, I guess that's about it. So,
Absolutely not to
um,
worry, my friend. An easy mistake certainly happens to the best of us. But again, that the up to date information on your winter storm, some very important information to know. And with that, we conclude this broadcast. So until next time,
I'm Jacob Falmer.
and I'm Isaac Hedges, host of GWP Live, from all of us at GWP Live and Great World Productions.